I wanted to make a video today about something that has always bugged me ever since I was a teenager. When you're a teenager, you start to appreciate the fact that everybody has their own agenda, and that's perfectly acceptable. I mean, the stock market itself is predicated on the idea that everybody who participates in it is doing the best for their company, for their stockholders. It's expected that you have an agenda to take care of yourself, which is completely acceptable. However, a lot of the time, um, people have to have what I call a pretense in order to communicate. Meaning, all things that they say must be measured against this pretense. It's a state of being that explains all other states of being, and it drove me crazy as a kid watching the juxtaposition between the older, wiser people in my life and the younger people, because the people who I was stuck with, that I had to relate to, that I had to be associated with, their pretense was faulty to me, something I didn't like about it. And I've never been able to put my finger on it until today. And the pretense is twofold. The first part of the pretense is that, uh, each person, myself, say, for example, I am completely acceptable and worthy with no examination, meaning entitlement, essentially, saying I doesn't matter if I get up today and decide to yell at someone, or if I decide to this or that, it doesn't matter. Without examination, I am worthy of being heard, which is a great lie that we were all told. Um, and it's, exactly what makes people orators. Like, not that I have a political issue with any of these people, but like Bill Maher or uh, what's that guy on Fox News? Sean Hannity. These people who just talk for a living. They are under this impression that no matter what they say, without examination, what they say is worth hearing. And it is so annoying, so false. And it makes sense why the country does it that way, because the people that we look at in the media who are supposed to pave the way have a bad case of flimsy pretense. And that's the ultimate flimsy pretense, that you're worthy no matter what, because it relieves you from any responsibility. And then the other part of this is that to examine would be to make unworthy, which is not necessarily true. Very often, if you examine something and it's shown to be worthy, it is actually more worthy now that it's been examined. And in fact, only if you are unworthy would examining your being, yourself, your existence, and your choices, those things, if they're examined and found to be, you know, less, it's because they are less, not because of the examination process itself. And you hear this at the chitter chatter at the table at the lunch when you're in high school, and you hear it just as much at the cafe when you're older. People talking in an entitled way as if they deserve to be heard. And again, this is part of a self serving agenda. If you are to be able to communicate, it should be assumed that that is done without constantly examining it. And that's the very American way of doing it. That's why we're thought of as loud, because our pretense is it's more important to say something than what that they say. Um, and so I was examining this today, and I was trying to think of a pretense that would be superior, because what I ended up adopting from a very young age, because my father's kind of in an outlier of these things. That's why I talk about, dads and grandpas and people who I could see but who were not my peers, took a very different pretense. And for example, my father's is the pretense to be without error. He will love the idea of an infinite Excel spreadsheet where all the values are properly organized and able to be referenced accurately. That would bring him such peace of soul, because his pretense is that there's a way to have a world with no error. And so obviously I couldn't pick that, because it's just as entitled, just as chauvinistic, just as presumptuous, and just as flimsy as I am worthy without any examination of that statement or myself. And so I landed somewhere in between subconsciously. I wanted the quest for knowledge, but I didn't want the pretense to be that I am right. I wanted it to be that I am looking for the right answer. And so throughout my life, it's been very confusing for people, because my flimsy pretense, although I believe it to be less flimsy than the other two, is that A, I'm on a quest for knowledge, and B, that quest for knowledge has no end. Meaning that in the the eternal universe of all possibilities of anything that could ever happen, it doesn't matter what happens. The thing that it is measured against in my psyche is the idea that I'm on an unending journey for knowledge. And I thought that worked really well for a while, and it did. The only problem is you get down to personal relationships. So, like, somebody whose pretense is that they're worthy no matter what, they'll just sit there and uh, bond with people all day. They'll just bond and bond and bond and bond and bond. And that's not something that I could do because that's not where my mind is at. That's not where my being. That's not where I'm coming from, as it were. I'm coming from a place of trying to learn, and that gets very very frustrating for some people, and it gets very very frustrating for me as well, because I'll be trying to teach something or I'll be trying to learn something, and this other person will be more interested in their own entitlement or the fact that they think they are right, or all these pretenses that people get in their head. So I thought today about pretenses. And if pretenses are necessary, what would be the most advantageous of the pretenses? Because at the end of the day, I'm not, if there was a pretense that said, um, I'm a nasty human who's covered in the sin of all previous decisions in my lineage and those things, I don't have to think that I'm better than people to interact. And in fact, there is a part of me that puts myself in that lower position because I think it's more effective. I can learn more as a student than as somebody who knows, which is where I learn faster and better than my dad, because my dad starts from a place of, oh, I'm right. Oh, no, I'm not right. No, now what's going on? And I start from a place of, I don't know what's going on. Tell me. It's much quicker, much easier, much more plug and play to understand with people. So my point is that I'm not looking for the pretense that makes me seem like I get everything I want and I deserve everything. I'm looking for the one that works the best for all manner of things, from making relationships and being, sweet or whatever, all the way up through great cosmic knowledges and wisdom. All these things that don't necessarily impact survival, but which are a part of a rich tapestry. Do we even need pretenses? I feel like a lot of people don't look at pretenses as a gateway. It's not a way to experiment with your consciousness and your way of interacting with the world. It's more of a way to create identity for most people. And so when people are thinking about pretenses, they think about things like, well, I can't think that I'm not number one because then I'm not serving myself. I'm not serving the stockholders. I'm not in my best interest. They would lock me up if I didn't think I was the best because I wouldn't be taking care of myself. I wouldn't be in my own interest, which is not true, but these are kind of the ways people construct these things subconsciously. So I determined that you do in fact need a pretense, because without a pretense you have no anchor, you have no place to come from. But which place would be best to come from for me and the people around me, so that we can have the best interactions? And I don't think that it's wise to just say, well, I'm coming from a place of wanting to understand, or understand emotionally. I'm not coming from a place of trying to create the most connections and the deepest, all that stuff, because that's honestly takes you further away from the truth and more into, oh, I love you because this and that and this. Those are just opinions. Those aren't any sort of truth. Like if you were 100% lovey-dovey all day, you would be further from reality because you'd be all hyped up on oxytocin than if you were, say, welding all day. You would definitely have a closer relationship with reality by not believing yourself to be the greatest. So I determined that A, pretenses are necessary, and B, one should not ever take a pretense which is not based off of what's effective. Meaning, if you're trying to effectively feel love, then that is your measure, and your pretense should probably be acceptance and humility and all those things, and those are very very good. But if you are a businessman or something and you're trying to feed an entire organization's families. Like, you have to bring the money, and any decision that you mess up messes up all these people's lives. You cannot be coming from a place of just pure compassion, because you have to be very close to reality and what's actually happening and what's likely. So I had kind of an in-between thought where I was like, okay, what if my pretense is that I'm trying to help you in my way? But I feel like if I go that direction, it's too unfulfilling. That's why people don't choose pretenses like, maybe I'm alone in this universe and maybe my life will never be what I want it to be. Because that is disempowering, but it's also it's not an effective way to see reality, right? As true as it might be. In the same way, by making my pretense to be, oh, I'm trying to help you, I'm setting myself up for failure, because now I cannot be fulfilled, because I will never be able to help someone 100%. And in fact, I'll never have a metric by which to measure that. So I will never be able to confirm or deny that, examined or unexamined. So I think what I've decided is, instead of going the route of like, oh, well, I'm just trying to help, or I'm just trying to feel good, or I'm just trying to build relationships, I even went through the thought of, maybe I just want to make money. It's very simple. Again, in my best interest. Nobody can lock me up for, not acting in my own self-interest. Because very often the statute of whether or not you can be institutionalized against your will is whether or not you are a harm to yourself or others. And it could be argued that if your internal, presumptions, your pretenses are not towards money, like just to make some sort of improvement for yourself, then you are hurting yourself. You might not be feeding yourself, you might not be doing all these things, or you might not be forming relationships with the people or in the ways that the world would like you to. And so I thought perhaps the safest option is to just say I want to make money, because nobody could accuse me of being crazy or not taking care of myself, which are the same terms in America. So, without stopping too hard on the side note that compassion is disincentivized by the economy, we need to find a pretense that can fulfill 3 criteria. One, that it is confirmable, meaning if my pretense is that I am so great and I deserve to talk, that I can confirm, I can examine whether or not I am so great and good and worthy of understanding. 2, the criteria it must fill is that it be effective, meaning that in a given set of likely scenarios and relationships, it would bring the greatest good to the most people in that situation, meaning make people the most happy, or make people the most comfortable, or make people understand the most, or make people think the most, or something like that. And I really do enjoy having people think about themselves, and that's why I was so frustrated as a kid that everybody's pretense is that I don't need to examine myself, and to examine myself would just be disrespectful. For you to examine whether or not I'm worthy is just out of the question. And I'm saying, you are worthy of existing. I'm saying worthy of another 35 minutes of my time to have this lunch and find out in that 35 minutes that you are just like so happy that Chris texted you. And the third criteria it must fill is that it's easy. I don't want a pretense that's so complicated that in order to understand anything that I say, you need a planetary, history class. And I think what I decided on, to not be condescending and just try to help everyone and constantly stress myself out over whether or not everyone's okay in my approximation, or constantly approximating what is okay to me and other people. I think the best pretense I can have, personally, without driving myself crazy with logical fallacies and unexamined assumptions, would be that my pretense is life is hard, but life is worthy. And another way to say that would be that, the higher powers are out to get me, and I take great joy in knowing that they will not catch me today. And that's about the best I can do. And that's actually just a stated approximation of what I've always done. A lot of times people say, why are you laughing at that? You shouldn't laugh at that, or blah, blah, blah. And I just have to explain, well, it's laugh or cry. You know, it's either embrace life and all its difficulties and accept the adventure that is everything, or end up in a little tiny hole where all I care about is whether or not Stacy questioned my worth as a orator, or as a woman, or as a man, or any of those things. So I hope that you can find a healthy pretense for you, that you can understand, that is true to you, and that other people can understand and can serve you in your relationships. Um, there is nothing which becomes more manageable through lack of examination. So thank you for exploring uh, the pretenses that we all take upon ourselves in order to uh, exist in a communicative societal structure.